Hello to everyone watching this recording. Again, my name is Joseph, and this is the third Alumni Spotlight interview. With me today is Mr. Kris Lowe. Mr. Lowe is the Senior Director in the Dallas office for JLL Capital Markets. He joined JLL as part of the HFF acquisition back in 2019. And prior to HFF, he was the CFO of Cox Athletics and actually played basketball here at SMU from 2000 to 2004. So thank you for joining me today, Mr. Lowe.
Absolutely, Joseph. Man, thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. So just starting off, jumping right into it. As I previously mentioned, you went to SMU and then actually went to Ernst & Young, EY, doing accounting for a few years before becoming CFO of Cox Athletics. And then, HFF and now JLL after acquisition around a year and a half ago. Can you just sort of walk us through the mindset of each decision and specifically the move into real estate with HFF?
Yeah, man. First of all, I'll back up a little bit more and bore the group with my life story. I'm an Atlanta native, and college basketball brought me to Dallas, and truly blessed and fortunate for the opportunity to go to SMU and be a student athlete. And, in addition to just an unbelievable network of a student body, I was fortunate enough to work really hard and get into the business school. But I had a decision to make early on. It's hard to be a full-time student and athlete and participate in what is typically a great social life at SMU. So I figured I could only do two of the three really well. So I'm trying, in my ages today to make up for lost social time, but worked really hard to get into Cox and major in accounting. At the time, quite honestly, there was a little bit more of a stronger emphasis on, maybe oil and gas and finance and accounting. Real estate, especially commercial real estate, wasn't as sophisticated as it was, when I was in school as it is today. And Folsom was around, but not as the Folsom that we know today, thanks to the great leadership of, Dean Myers and Joseph Cahoon, Tasha, Madeline, and the rest of the staff. And so for me, at the end of my playing career, it was kind of a question of opportunity cost, right? Do I go overseas and try to continue my career as a, professional basketball player, or really jump into my business career? And because I couldn't do internships every summer as a student athlete, I decided to just, forego, what were probably the last few years of my playing career and jump right into my accounting career at Ernst & Young, just really trying to make up for lost time. And I'm glad that I did. So I graduated in 2004 from Cox, and back then, this is in the world of public accounting where there was a lot of white collar crime going on, right? So WorldCom and Enron and all these companies are going down, and so companies like Ernst & Young that had forensic accounting groups were just full of business and great opportunities. So I found myself young, not as smart, and single, traveling the world, living in all of these amazing different cities, learning a lot about kind of forensic accounting matters, and that was just something new and unique for me, and it was something that I tried to look at that point in time and just learn as much as I could in that world, knowing I didn't want to do it forever. Obviously working for a Big Four accounting firm, you always have an audit client. So Atmos Energy was my audit client here in Dallas that I would come back and work on, and I would always ask questions, of the scheduler about different service lines and other business opportunities within EY, and I found my way into the mergers and acquisitions group, transaction advisory services, and that's where I first got my exposure to transactions and deals, which I absolutely loved. Just kind of putting, 1 + 1 and making it equal 3 through M&A deals. But I always had this kind of natural curiosity around real estate. And I could never find my way into either real estate deals or real estate private equity. And so I had this love for deals. I had this interest in real estate. The closest I could get to it at EY was really in like a valuations department, which kind of felt more like being an appraiser, which nothing wrong with that. Love my appraiser colleagues today, but not something I wanted to do forever. So I'm trying to get into real estate, trying to do deals, and then boom, it's 2009 and the GFC hits, and I cannot pay anyone to, I couldn't pay someone to go work for a real estate firm at that time.
Yes.
And got a call from SMU. And it actually came through the business school when SMU hired a new athletics director. He wanted a change in leadership and went to, at the time, Dean Nemai and my dear friend Kevin Knox. And I had shared with both of those gentlemen that I was kind of looking to maybe make a move. And they were kind enough to put me up. So here's the SMU network in action. And I decided to come back to Dallas, come back to the hilltop. My career at EY was, leaving on Sunday and coming home on Thursday. So it was a chance to come back to Dallas, re-engage with my network. But what really sold me on the opportunity to go work in the athletics department at SMU were two things. One, a chance to just give back to a school that I had felt had already given me so much with a great, undergraduate degree in accounting and a great network. But number two is leadership. Even very early on in my career, and guys and gals as sophisticated as you recognize, life's too short to work with jerks. And I really bought into the leadership of Steve Orsini because he was proven. The reality is, as a student athlete himself, he was a national championship on the 1977 NCAA football team at Notre Dame. The other co-captain is the Hall of Famer Joe Montana. And then he was also a very successful businessman, both in the private sector and then also within intercollegiate athletics. And I'll never forget, I think, our football team was struggling, and he was telling me, Kris, we're going to turn around football, and we're going to turn around basketball, and we're going to get this place, to be something you're proud, and your fellow alumni are proud in terms of the sports programs. And we did it. We hired June Jones, go back to our first bowl game in 25 years, hire Larry Brown, get the basketball team headed back in the right trajectory, renovate Moody Coliseum, which to this day is the best real estate project I've ever done. And once you kind of, hang that skin on the wall, that's why I'm on the service side as an intermediary. I don't know if I can do anything much better than Moody Coliseum, especially allowing, beer and wine to be served for my fellow Mustang colleagues. And so it was really leadership, and then the opportunity to, run a P&L, hire a staff, vision cast, in more of a managerial role. But it was also something that I knew I didn't want to do forever. I felt that I could give back to SMU in a greater way by being in the private sector in Dallas. And so Steve, my athletics director, we sat down early on, and I had kind of painted this picture for him that I wanted to go back to business school. And I'm always thinking about ways that I can get better. And so I thought if I can take an undergrad in accounting, combine it with a CPA, go back to business school, and pivot back into the private sector in the commercial real estate, capital market side, that would give me an opportunity to be a better, bigger, stronger alum for SMU Cox and SMU as a whole. So with that, I went back to business school in 2012 and knew from day one I wanted to get back into the private side and kind of set on my journey to find an opportunity in commercial real estate. And for my entire, pretty much 2 years in the executive MBA program, all I was doing was talking and networking to people in every stage of the real estate business. And for those, especially Cox students who maybe heard me say this before, saying you want to work in commercial real estate is like saying you want to go buy a car, right? And it's just, the options are wide and vast. And so I spent a lot of time in business and during my business school years talking to folks in different service lines just to figure out exactly where I fit. And it was truly in the intermediary space. And then it came down to culture. And one of my mentors had led me to HFF. And after meeting, Mark Gibson, Jody Thornton, and Mona Carlton, I was sold. And it then became an interesting conversation because here I am, 10 years into a professional career. But what I appreciated and respect about the way HFF teaches the business is from the ground up. And so I'll never forget Jody Thornton saying to me, look, no promises will be made, but if you're willing to check the ego at the door and start in our analytical pool, we'll see what happens. And I said, well, look, that's kind of the story of my life. I'm willing to bet on myself. And so I started as probably one of the oldest, analysts ever in the pool at HFF back in 2014. And then, learned as much as I can. I would liken it to getting a PhD in commercial real estate capital markets. And then, moved into production, in 2017. And today I'm a senior director on our debt and equity placement team. I spend most of my time on multi-housing, entire capital stack. And then here most recently have gone back and got sponsored by FINRA through the Series 7 and Series 63 exams to get rehired by HFF Securities, which is our broker-dealer license, where I spend a little bit of our time working on our family office initiative and potential fund placement engagements.
Okay, yes, yeah, thank you. You mentioned, right, that, before moving into HFF, you went to grad school at SMU just to sort of find, where you best fit in within the real estate industry. Can you talk about sort of the value for students today who are considering perhaps getting an MBA right out of college? I mean, is it something that should be done sort of to, for upward mobility within a company after working a couple of years, or is it something that could be used to help you get that first job?
Yeah, great question. And I remember being there. There was a point early on in my career where I wasn't exactly, loving what I was doing. And so I was going to just pull the ripcord and go back to business school. And, I remember someone telling me, you need a little bit more work experience. 2 years isn't enough. And I was kind of like, yeah, but you don't know how miserable I am, right? Or you don't know how hard it is to get a job. You're kind of looking for anything and everything. And honestly, Joseph, I think that was really, really good advice. And the reason why is when I look back on my business school years, it was really me teaching and learning from my classmates, and really the professors are facilitating more. So an example would be, my first year in business school in the first semester where you're having accounting classes, right? I remember teaching, kind of my group mates, all about, debits and credits and, revenue recognition principles and all those things. Or in an organizational behavior class, right, I'm the only one in the room that can speak to what it's like to hire June Jones away from the University of Hawaii after he's playing the University of Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, right? And while that entire story may not resonate to my group mate who works at Sonic, or my other group mate who worked at Owens Corning, there may be one nugget or one strategy that we, deployed in that instance that they could take back to be a better business professional. So I would recommend you have more work experience before going back to get an MBA. But I think what's amazing today are all of the Masters in Science programs. So I would highly encourage, if you're a recent grad or you don't have, enough work experience, which is kind of a gray area and to be defined, highly consider the one-year master's program. So for me, when I was an undergrad, the Texas State Board of Accountancy had just passed a rule where you had to have 150 hours. So I think accounting was actually one of the first majors across the state that allowed students to go into the fifth-year programs. And since then, we see Master of Science, Master in Entrepreneurship, Master of Management, Marketing, Real Estate, etc. Those are exceptional programs that allow you to go become an expert in a certain discipline, right? Because I would tell you, my executive MBA program was great, but we're talking about global and macro level issues, right? So we're going a mile wide and not a mile deep. And, for me, I'm all about, kind of technical expertise, if you will, and for what I do today, right? People want to hire HFF, now JLL Capital Markets, and/or our debt and equity placement team, and/or Kris Lowe for a specific reason, and therefore I think the ability, early on for students to go back and get, just depth in a certain subject or focus and concentration area is exceptional. And had I had it then, definitely would have been something that I would have considered. Definitely before the MBA. And then the one last reason I'd say is, look, I mean, at 20, 22 years old, like, no one knows what they want to do forever. Not everyone does, right? And so maybe keep that MBA in your back pocket to pivot, like, closer to 30, right? If you get it when you're early, I guess you'd have to ask yourself the question, if I get the MBA at 22 and then I want to pivot later, how do I do that? And for me, going back to business school later, I think allowed me to add more value to my classmates, and then two, allowed me the opportunity to pivot away from higher education into commercial real estate.
Okay, yes. I mean, you mentioned there sort of in the process of getting your MBA, right, that one of the main lessons and takeaways from that experience was just learning from peers and being able to have the experience prior to actually going to grad school. I mean, that was one of the big lessons from that. Can you talk about lessons from, Division I basketball at SMU that transferred over to the professional environment?
Man, there's a lot. I mean, the biggest thing would be time management. I went to a solid public high school in Atlanta, but I just don't think there's really anything that can prepare a high school athlete for the demands of being a student athlete. Mm-hmm. And me, the student athlete requirements at SMU. I mean, I'm proud to say I dropped one class in 4 years at SMU and got in and out of Cox in 4 years plus summers with a degree in accounting. And you think about I think the minimum hours per the NCAA were 20 hours a week, but we did more than that with the voluntary workouts and trying to get the degree in accounting. I mean, it was just a full day that I had, a calendar blocked, except for probably, 6 to maybe 8 hours a night to sleep. And so the discipline and time management, I think the patience, deferred, kind of delayed gratification, if you will, right? Like, I can't tell you how many wonderful fraternity and sorority parties I probably missed, right? Because I had to get some more sleep in order to be, ready to go bright and early the next day. And those things are really, those decisions are tough, right? At 18, 19 years old, missing spring breaks to hopefully playing basketball tournaments, missing holidays. But I think you learn to play the long game in life. And I would tell you a lot of those principles carried with me through EY, through my time at SMU, and definitely back to HFF in terms of, at the age of, 30, for me at the time I was married with our daughter was born, and, I would, be in the office between 6 and 6:30. I'd work through lunch. I'd go home, give my daughter a bath, and then I'd come back to the office at 9 o'clock at night and work until midnight or 1. And the reason was I just wanted the knowledge. I wanted to get up to speed on the business because I knew that was all information, expertise, history that I could carry with me and therefore be more valuable to my clients and be more valuable to my business partners here at HFF JLL Capital Markets. And so time management is definitely the big one. And I would even kind of say here recently with kind of going through the FINRA process, when I've just kind of when I make my mind up to do something and just kind of put my head down and focus on it, I just get it done and get gazelle intense and take care of business. So I think the focus and the discipline, the time management, were definitely, kind of a skill set that I use to this day.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can you talk about for students, sort of considering different career paths? I mean, can you talk about capital markets in general? I mean, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? What types of personalities are best suited for capital markets brokerage?
Absolutely. I'll try to make my comments brief because I get passionate about capital markets and commercial real estate and could talk about it for hours. But look, you think about a few thematics, right? Number one, commercial real estate continues to be an asset class that's growing in sophistication, right? It used to be bracketed and bucketed within alternatives, and we've got our own GICS classification. It continues to be an outperformer as an asset class. Therefore, more capital wants in, more people want to work in the business. I think we're at this amazing, kind of intersection of technology and real estate as well, which obviously I think speaks more to millennials than it did to baby boomers and to Gen X. And so, to be sitting here in Dallas, where Texas is obviously going to be a winner post-COVID, what we're seeing is capital come off of the coast from the, historically 6 major gateway cities into markets like DFW. Now, my business partners around the hallway here have been pounding the table for decades saying, Dallas is a gateway market. And today we're seeing that from capital, right? And so I think the opportunity to be sitting here in Dallas and see investors come into the space, why they're coming into the space, just gives us a very unique viewpoint than a lot of places in different parts of the country. You look at commercial real estate investment, globally, right? Kind of, foreign capital wanting to come into the U.S., and those inbound flows continue to pick up. And so I think the combined sophistication with obviously the outperforming risk-adjusted returns that we've continued to see, make us just very well positioned to do well into the future. Demographics, right, are obviously a big driver of what we do. If a company announces that they're bringing 500 to 1,000 jobs to DFW, I don't even think it makes the news anymore, right? I mean, we're very fortunate that a lot of, especially post-pandemic, investment merits are sitting right here, right? And so you look at, the outer ring suburban areas of Frisco and Plano and South Lake and elsewhere, and those are just going to continue to blow and go, so to speak. And so again, for our clients, we've got a ground, level view of what's going on here in order to advise them with what we're seeing. From a property type standpoint, and I know I've talked to some of the Folsom and Cox students about this. Right now, multi and industrial and life sciences are more in favor, kind of low CapEx, obviously lower density property types. I would be the last person to tell you that I would ever bet against office, much like I would tell you I'm the last person to ever bet against a city like New York, right? Office isn't dead. Surprisingly, the deals that have started to transact lately have maybe been 5% off. Most recently, retail, we've heard a lot more about retail coming back. A lot of that is driven by the debt capital market. The CMBS market is back. The bridge market is coming back. And so this increase in allocation from both an equity and a debt standpoint do one clear thing. It puts more sand in the sandbox to have more transactions. So if you came to our office right now, I don't think you'd be surprised by the number of people that are in the office, but I think you'd be surprised at how busy we are. And I think from a volume standpoint, we're pretty much back to a pre-COVID level. So we anticipate a pretty busy fourth quarter, and then obviously jumping into 2021 with a full-out sprint.
Yes. Okay. I mean, can you also comment on what sort of personalities are suited for capital markets brokers? Is it someone that's, more into, sort of an outgoing personality, really people person, able to have those relationships, or is it a mix of that and sort of, enjoying working with numbers? Can you talk about what sort of personalities thrive in capital markets brokerage?
You got it. See, that's what I mean. I'll just keep going on and on about capital markets. It's really the intangibles is something consistently that I look for. Curiosity, right? Like, are you just naturally curious and passionate about the business? And I think we all demonstrate that in different ways, right? You may meet someone who moved a lot and just was always curious in real estate. For me, my family knows I typically don't drive to the same restaurant the same way, or if there's a building under construction, we're going to have to drive around it 3 times, and Dad may get out and act like he's an owner's rep just because he's, asking questions. And those are things that, right, like I can't teach you. No one here can teach you. And the reason those are important is everyone says they want to do deals until they actually do deals. Deals take a lot of time. Deals take a lot of patience. Deals take a lot of persistence. We'll call over 120 lenders just to get to one, for a debt placement engagement. And, I think there are, outside of the curiosity, really just the persistence and the passion. And how does that come across in an interview or in a resume, right? How about your ability to lead? And that can be anything from, a debate or a chess team or a dance league or anything, right? We just want to see. And really what we're looking for there is someone who's a self-starter, right? I don't really like to ask people, hey, where are we on something, when just the same way like my clients shouldn't have to ask me that question, right? So how are you proactively trying to get better as a student? How are you proactively leading on campus? And what that correlates to is how you're going to be proactive in the office. And, and listen, recently I'm kind of a stickler on culture. I mean, I got on somebody in our office because, they took the last paper towel and didn't, put a new fresh, paper towel roll on the rack, right? And it's just those kind of details and kind of playground principles that I think protect a culture, build a culture, and represent the people that we want to have. Because at the same time, the work that our Cox students in Folsom has done from a technical side, I mean, you guys and gals are unbelievable. A lot of those are skills that we can teach. You're coming in with them, so we're going to kind of move quickly from academics to live, live transactions and put you in the game, so to speak. But if there's anything else that you're doing to improve, technically or interpersonally, I think that goes a long way. So the question I've asked myself, I've asked of our analysts, and I would ask of the Cox students is, when someone asks you soon, how did you use the extra time during COVID to get better? What's your answer, right? And maybe it's, well, I'm not a great public speaker, so I joined a Toastmasters club. Or, I was doing recorded Zoom videos on presentation skills and working on just how I am in front of a camera, right? I mean, we've spent classes at this and, kind of time at this point on Zoom etiquette, right? And I don't know if there's, anyone who has figured that out exactly, but let's be honest. In February or going into 2020, I don't know how many professionals were thinking about their, I would say on-screen presence, right? That's a real thing now. And it's something that's going to probably stay. And so whether it's technical, whether it's interpersonal, again, what I would be looking for is someone who just, told me maybe something a little more than they lowered their golf handicap. Don't get me wrong. That's good. I need to work on mine. But probably having a little bit more of an intentional and thoughtful answer would be a great way to separate yourself in an interview.
Okay, yes. Yep. I mean, you mentioned earlier, starting off at HFF, that you were an analyst and you really had a ground up approach, learning everything sort of almost from scratch and then moving into more of a producer role. I mean, can you talk about what the traditional career path looks like? How long does that process take? Do most people in capital markets brokerage, do they stay and move into the producer role after being an analyst, or do they move to other, roles in other companies, and what are those roles typically like?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think on average it's probably 3 to 5 years from analyst to producer, just in terms of the data. Quite honestly, I loved my time as an analyst, right? Because the deals are coming in. As a producer, the charge is to go out and get them. And so it's a pretty great seat to be in because you can learn, quite a bit in that chair. But 3 to 5 years is the typical time frame. But production is not for everyone for different reasons, right? Whether it's a compensation structure, whether it's just a mentality of, would want more, safety in terms of, a salary or more balance, in life, right? Because you're coming in, most of our analysts obviously are coming in right out of college, and there may be, family and personal reasons that may pull you into a different direction, and there's nothing wrong with that. But clearly a lot of our analysts end up at some of our best clients, right? So as you look across the companies and clients that participate in the Folsom Institute, whether it's, Crow Holdings, whether it's Thackeray Partners, right, Chief, and the list kind of goes on. And around Dallas, a lot of our analysts end up, at a lot of our clients because our clients know how we train them. Our clients understand the culture that we're trying to, instill in our younger analysts in terms of work ethic, but also, the technical expertise, the relationships, and just understanding that, even in the middle of a pandemic, I think everyone in commercial real estate will tell you this will always be a relationship business. I tell our analysts all the time, even though we're capital markets advisors and we're providing a service and, we may be a little bit further removed from the physical hard asset, this is a relationship business. And so, for our analyst, if a path of production isn't there, you can definitely end up at a client. Obviously, being a consumer of capital, we've had analysts go to be providers of capital, right? Both on the equity side and both on the debt side as lenders. So it's, I think the best thing about starting, at a place like an HFF JLL Capital Markets is, again, that ability to just learn, right? And that should be the goal for everybody, is where can I go and learn the most so that wherever I go next, I have more options and I'm going to be able to add more value right away because of where I started off at. And that's what we endeavor to do.
Okay, yes, thank you. So you graduated around, or it's 2004, which was early enough to see sort of the full scope of the Great Recession, of course. I mean, what were some of the biggest lessons personally from that experience? And can you relate that to any takeaways that you've had from the coronavirus pandemic, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how do you get better, right? You can't sit on your hands. Relationships and clients are established during the hard times, right? So we're a service-oriented, provider, right? We're compensated on fee-based income when deals close, and the reality is there may be times where we're advising a client, and it's in the client's best interest not to transact right now. Well, guess what? That hurts our production numbers. Guess what? That hurts my compensation. But my interests are always subordinate to my clients, right? Client's interest comes first. We have two clients on every deal, typically a consumer and a provider of capital. And so back to, kind of earlier lessons learned around patience, around humility, it's a long game. And so I think, combining a client's interest as well as what am I doing during this time to get better technically? What am I doing during this time to be a thought leader so that I can pick up the phone and call a client and talk to them about transactions we're seeing, talk to them about personnel moves in the market, talk to them about a change in appetite from capital, moving out of office into industrial, or capital moving off the coast and into Dallas, right? Especially during a pandemic where people can't travel. Back to my earlier point, Texas is such a favored, location for investment. I'm able to provide live data points to my clients in Southern California, Atlanta, Boston, Seattle, right, Denver, about what's going on. So I'm almost an extension of them in terms of being eyes and ears on the ground, because a lot of times, right, I mean, there's a lot of clients that we deal with. I mean, they're very lean. Right. And during a pandemic, people are looking at headcount. People are trying to figure out how to maintain profitability, and they're dealing with their own internal management issues. Right. And so I think it gives us a great opportunity to build stronger relationships. And so, we've got weekly or monthly calls just to update them on everything that we're seeing. Right. Because we do this all day, every day. They may be working on a transaction or two a month, but, reporting to investors, dealing with annual audits, dealing with taxes, managing personnel, right? They have a lot of other, kind of corporate level responsibilities that they're charged to maintain. Therefore, I think this gives us a great opportunity to build their trust as their preferred capital markets advisor.
Okay, I want to take a second and sort of go back to the beginning of your career with EY, and can you talk about some of the main differentiators and what you're doing on a daily basis, but more just in culture and just culture fit between EY and HFF? And I mean, why would you make them move out of accounting? What made you, you mentioned that you loved the M&A deals back at EY, but what made you sort of move out of that role?
Yeah, to the point on the cultural similarities, one of the things I love the most about EY was it was full of nothing but incredibly smart people who were trying to figure out what they wanted to be when they grew up. And so we were all there to just learn and all there to grow. And, if there were, kind of anything from, assurance and advisory or M&A or tax issues to solve, they were always on the leading edge of solving those problems for clients. So I could definitely draw a very straight parallel to, HFF and JLL Capital Markets, just in terms of people. I mean, for me, I care more about the who than the what. I know my passion is real estate and it's real estate capital markets today, but, I can probably figure out a way to, do anything for 80 hours a week, but kind of back to, who am I working with and how am I learning? And, do I trust the people that I'm working with, right? How do they live their lives outside of the work hours, right? What's their family life like? Those are kind of an important value set to me. And I would tell you, if I hosted a dinner and pulled people together from both my EY days and my HFF and now JLL days, boy, those are going to line up, unbelievably close, right? And the mentors and sponsors I've had, I think about, a David Alexander and Ryan Burke were two partners at EY that were unbelievable to me. And obviously, Mark Gibson and Jody Thornton and Mona Carlton here at HFF. And then as I'm starting to meet our new, JLL partners, right? I mean, John Gates and, Brad Sellner and these types of gentlemen, I'm like, they're the same people almost, right? Just in terms of culture. Yeah. Just the quality of people that they are and, the success that they've had in business. And so I was recently having a conversation with a colleague of mine, and, we both finished at SMU around the same time. And I said, man, look, we're unbelievably blessed. I mean, you look up, and for he and I look at the leaders in Dallas that have shaped commercial real estate, how the phone and be in front of them and try to learn from these guys and gals that have, 2 and 3 decades of experience and have made, commercial real estate and Dallas successful as a whole. And the reason that myself and everybody listening to the video want to be in the business. And so with that, with that in mind, it then almost becomes a charge to me to say to myself, I can never fill, the shoes of a lot of these titans, but how do I wake up every day and try to be the best and maybe inspire and or educate the next generation like you and your classmates? Yeah, to your point on why I pivoted, I think it was if EY had maybe had like, a real estate transactions group, would I try to do more of that? Maybe I think there was something about, HFF for me, we were a special forces. We were just a very small company at the time at, fewer than 1,000. And that was really appealing to me. And I think that was, after leaving SMU where it was clearly very small and I had a small staff, I was really interested in the intimacy. Fortunately, I had the EY experience because today, kind of back to JLL being 90,000 employees, right, I can draw down on those experiences quickly in order to hopefully be, successful today in a larger organization.
Okay, yes. I also want to I think it'd be beneficial if you could talk about the biggest mistake you've made in your career and what did you learn from it, or maybe not mistake, but the biggest learning experience in your career.
Yeah, such a good question. I'll try to stick to one. I think the obvious one for me is probably not getting into commercial real estate early enough, but a lot of that I think was outside of my own control. I think what I'd say to the question is you can stay at a place too long. I think business 2 to 3 decades ago, right? Like you'd graduate, you go work for, a big company and you would never leave. When I started in my career, I don't want to say it was frowned upon, right? But it was kind of like, people I think culturally were still, accepting the fact that an employee would want to, change gears and move on to a different career. I think today it's widely accepted. And I think what I would say is, your job, kind of coming out of college is to learn as much as you can. And don't think for a moment that just because you're 22 or 23, you can't go to people and say, here's what I want to learn, or I'm curious to get into this service line, or curious to learn about this industry. I would say, be more intentional with your career. It is your career. Don't leave it in the hands of a corporation, right? A corporation is clearly just made up of its people, but take control of it, take ownership of it, so that you're constantly growing. I think the mistake that people will make is they just accept the fact that they're unhappy, and not learning, and they're kind of just getting by. And it's like, look, man, life is short. And, I think you got to, try different experiences in order to find your passion, right? But if you never change jobs and you only work in one industry, or you only work in one function, that's going to make for a long career, right? And too short to be unhappy. So I would encourage, and again, I think millennials do a great job of this, is, be curious, remain curious. Don't be afraid to say, hey, look, I've been here 90 days and this ain't working, right? I mean, be patient, give it time, but, don't, just accept something, because you feel like you need to, challenge yourself to grow and learn. And if that means you got to move a department or change companies, so be it. I think in the long term, you'll look back on your career and be thankful that you had different and unique experiences that allow you to, again, ultimately add more value to your clients or your stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just mentioned sort of exploring different, avenues and career paths and finding what you really love to do. I mean, do you have any other sort of last piece of parting advice for students, current undergraduate students, and then building off of that as well? I mean, what's the greatest piece of advice that you've ever received?
I think it just in terms of the advice I'd give, I mean, it's hard for, I think, students to understand maybe today the strength and the depth of the SMU network and SMU Cox. It's unbelievable. I mean, the job that our board of trustees, our deans, our faculty and staff do I've watched the talent every year come through SMU and SMU Cox, and I'm blown away. I mean, little do you guys know, but this is actually Kris Lowe interviewing for you to hire me in a couple of years. And I think I would just encourage you to take advantage of it. I think, clearly millennials communicate in a very different way than when I was on campus. And so back to, if you want to be in real estate, build relationships early on, right? Like, it's easier to go to somebody that you've known for 10 years, right, and try to, possibly win a piece of business or get some career advice, than someone that you maybe never took the time to meet. And so, during my days on the hilltop, I wasn't a big headphones guy, quite honestly, only because I wanted to, have a conversation with people. I wanted to try to get to know people better. And I look up today, and those people are very key decision makers at some of the biggest, commercial real estate companies in the world. And so the one thing I would encourage is, to if you can, keep a little bit of a longer term perspective in mind and do everything you can early on to build, solid relationships.
And I mean, is there any relation to that and the best piece of advice you've received personally, or are those sort of identical?
Yeah, I think they're one and the same. I mean,
okay.
My list of kind of best advice ever received is it's a pretty lengthy list. It's probably just dependent on the situation and the mindset. But I think it goes back to just kind of thinking about happiness. An old kind of sports acronym is in sports how do you spell fun, and it's WIN. Like, I like to win. I like to win in business. I like to win on the scoreboard, and I love to compete. So I think a lot of those are just my own natural tendencies. But the reality is, I think, especially today, man, we all have a very fresh, renewed, and welcome perspective on life, right? And what is important to you, and what makes you happy. And I would just go back to, life is short, and, there's no need for you to, do things or be involved with people that are jerks, or maybe don't have a same shared value set. I think, obviously through technology today, there's a way to gain access to a lot of information, and there's a way to gain access to become a much more knowledgeable a lot faster. So, don't accept mediocrity, right? I think everybody is born with a level of greatness inside. We just got to figure out what motivates us and what we're passionate about. And then how do you surround yourself with great sponsorship and mentorship, which those two things are different, and then go after it.
Absolutely. I definitely hear that. Well, Mr. Lowe, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, I think this has been really beneficial for me personally, and I'm sure other students will agree and find it, extremely beneficial for them as well. So thank you again so much. I appreciate your time, and yeah, thank you.
All right, Joseph. Thanks so much, man. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you too.
Take care.
Okay, bye.